Marcus Chin stood at the floor-to-ceiling windows of his penthouse office, 70 stories above Manhattan, watching the city sprawl beneath him like a kingdom he'd conquered before turning 33. His reflection in the glass showed a man who'd traded everything soft for something harder, sharper. The kind of edges that cut through boardrooms and left competitors bleeding market share. He'd built Chin Technologies from a dorm room startup into a $15 billion empire in just over a decade. The cost? Every relationship that had ever mattered. His parents barely recognized the son, who'd stopped coming home for holidays. His college friends had become strangers who sold their stories to business magazines. And romance? That was just another transaction he'd learned to avoid. "Mr. Chin, your 3 o'clock is here," his assistant's voice crackled through the intercom. Marcus turned from the window, his hand-tailored suit catching the afternoon light. Another meeting, another deal, another zero added to an account that had stopped meaning anything around the billion-dollar mark. This was the life he'd chosen, he reminded himself. This was success. But success, he'd discovered, had a particular kind of silence to it. The penthouse he called home occupied the entire top floor of a building he owned in Tribeca. 12,000 square feet of minimalist perfection, all steel, glass, and imported marble. A museum where one billionaire happened to sleep. His housekeeper, Mrs. Petrov, kept it immaculate, though Marcus sometimes wondered why he bothered. He barely noticed his surroundings anymore. Everything changed on a rainy Tuesday in October. Marcus came home early, derailed by a canceled flight to Tokyo. He'd planned to work from his home office, but as the elevator opened directly into his foyer, he heard something he'd never heard in this space before: laughter. Children's laughter. He followed the sound through the vast living room, past the Rothko painting he'd bought at auction for $8 million, toward the kitchen. And there, in his spotless, rarely used kitchen, he found them. A woman he didn't recognize stood at the counter, her dark hair pulled back in a practical ponytail, flour dusting her simple blue dress. She couldn't have been more than 28, with warm brown skin and exhausted eyes that somehow still held light. And at her feet, creating an elaborate structure from his expensive copper pots and imported ceramic bowls, was a little girl. The child couldn't have been more than 3, with the same warm complexion as the woman, and hair that curled in every direction like she'd argued with gravity and won. She was completely absorbed in her architecture, stacking and balancing with the serious focus of an engineer. "Hello," Marcus said, and both heads snapped up. The woman's hand flew to her chest. "Mr. Chin, I'm so sorry, I didn't know you'd be home. Mrs. Petrov had a family emergency and she called me. I'm Elena Rodriguez. I work with the housekeeping service. She said you wouldn't mind if I brought my daughter, just this once, because my babysitter fell through and—" She was speaking too fast, her accent softening the edges of her words. Fear brightened her eyes. Marcus recognized that fear. He'd seen it in countless employees, in people who couldn't afford to lose their jobs, who lived one paycheck away from catastrophe. "It's fine," he said, and watched her shoulders drop an inch. "What are you making?" Elena glanced at the counter, where cookie dough sat in a mixing bowl. "Mrs. Petrov mentioned you never eat the food in your refrigerator before it expires. I thought I could make some meals you could freeze. And some cookies. I'm sorry, I should have asked." "It's fine," Marcus repeated, and surprised himself by meaning it. His eyes drifted back to the little girl, who'd stopped building and was now staring at him with a kind of unfiltered curiosity only children possessed. "That's my daughter, Sophia," Elena said softly. "Sophia, say hello to Mr. Chin." "Hello," Sophia whispered, then turned back to her pots and bowls. Marcus should have retreated to his office. Should have put distance between himself and this intrusion into his carefully controlled world. Instead, he found himself asking, "What is she building?" Elena smiled, and something about that smile made the massive kitchen feel smaller, warmer. "I don't know. Sophia doesn't talk much yet. The doctors say she's delayed, but she's brilliant in other ways. She understands everything. She just shows instead of tells. Marcus watched as Sophia carefully placed a small saucepan on top of her structure, balancing it with precision. The whole thing should have collapsed, but somehow, impossibly, it held. "That's quite an achievement," he said. Sophia looked up at him then, really looked, and Marcus felt something shift in his chest. Her eyes were huge and dark, and they held something he couldn't name. Something that made him think of the boy he'd been before ambition had hollowed him out. "She likes you," Elena said, surprise in her voice. "She doesn't usually like new people." Marcus didn't know what to say to that, so he said nothing. He stood there, the billionaire in his $1,000 shoes, watching a 3-year-old play with his cookware, and felt more present than he had in years. "I'll be in my office," he finally said. "Take your time." But he didn't go to his office. Not right away. He stood in the hallway, just out of sight, and listened to Elena talk softly to her daughter, singing something in Spanish as she worked. The melody drifted through his penthouse like sunlight through clouds, illuminating corners that had been dark so long he'd forgotten they existed. When he did retreat to his office, Marcus found he couldn't focus on the acquisition reports in front of him. His mind kept wandering to the kitchen, to the woman with tired eyes and capable hands, to the child who built impossible towers from ordinary things. He told himself it meant nothing. They'd be gone soon, and his life would return to its normal rhythm of meetings and deals and the comfortable numbness of success. But that night, after Elena and Sophia had left, Marcus walked into his kitchen and found it transformed. The counters gleamed. The refrigerator held neatly labeled containers of food that actually looked appealing. And on the counter, covered in plastic wrap, sat a plate of chocolate chip cookies with a note written in careful handwriting. "Thank you for your kindness today, Elena and Sophia." Marcus picked up a cookie. It was still slightly warm. He took a bite, and the taste of butter and chocolate, and something he could only identify as care filled his mouth. He stood alone in his enormous kitchen, eating homemade cookies for the first time in a decade, and felt the first crack form in the walls he'd built around his heart. Mrs. Petrov's family emergency stretched from days into weeks, and Elena became a regular presence in Marcus's penthouse. He told himself he approved the arrangement because Elena was efficient, because she understood that he valued silence and order. He didn't examine why he started working from home more often, or why he always seemed to know exactly when she'd arrive. Sophia came every time. Elena couldn't afford childcare on a housekeeper's wages, something that bothered Marcus more than he cared to admit. He'd written checks for millions without blinking, but the idea of this little girl's future constrained by dollar signs made something tighten in his chest. "She's no trouble," Elena always said, as if apologizing for her daughter's existence. "She plays quietly. You won't even know we're here." But Marcus always knew. The penthouse felt different when they were in it, less like a mausoleum and more like a home. He began to watch Sophia when he thought no one was looking. She was a strange, magical little creature who seemed to live halfway between this world and somewhere else. She rarely spoke, but she was always creating, building towers, arranging books by colors no one else could see, creating patterns from whatever materials she found. One afternoon, Marcus emerged from his office to find Sophia in his living room, sitting cross-legged on his imported Persian rug, arranging his collection of antique fountain pens in an elaborate spiral pattern. His first instinct was alarm. Those pens were worth over $50,000, some of them centuries old. But something stopped him from intervening. Sophia handled each one with such care, such reverence, as if she understood their value in a way that had nothing to do with money. Elena rushed in, panic on her face. "Sophia." "No, baby, those aren't toys." "Wait," Marcus said, surprising them both. He moved closer, crouching down to Sophia's level. "What are you making?" Sophia looked up at him, and for the first time since they'd met, she smiled. It was a small smile, hesitant, but it transformed her face entirely. She pointed to the spiral, then to the windows where the afternoon sun was streaming in. "She's following the light," Marcus said, understanding flooding through him. "The pattern, it matches how the sunlight moves across the floor." Elena stared at him, then at her daughter, then at the pens arranged in their perfect spiral. She's never done anything like this before." "She's brilliant," Marcus said softly. He looked at Sophia, really looked at her. "You see things the rest of us miss, don't you?" Sophia's smile widened. She reached out and touched his hand, so briefly it was almost not a touch at all, then went back to adjusting her spiral with microscopic precision. That touch stayed with Marcus all day, a ghost sensation he couldn't shake. When had another person's touch last meant something to him? When had he last felt genuinely seen by anyone? The next day, he found himself stopping at a bookstore on his way home from a meeting. The clerk looked startled to see Marcus chin browsing the children's section, but he ignored her recognition. He picked out books about shapes and patterns, about art and architecture, about all the things that might speak to a little girl who thought in pictures instead of words. When he gave them to Sophia the next morning, Elena's eyes filled with tears. "Mr. Chin, you didn't have to. These are too expensive." "They're books," Marcus said gruffly. "Every kid should have books." But they both knew it was more than that. It was acknowledgement. It was seeing. It was care. Sophia clutched the books to her chest and looked at Marcus like he'd handed her the world. Maybe he had. The weeks passed and a routine developed. Elena would arrive at 9, and Sophia would set up in whatever room Marcus wasn't using, creating her mysterious projects. Sometimes Marcus would emerge from his office to find elaborate constructions, couch cushions arranged in ascending size order, his books reorganized into rainbow patterns, his daughter's reflection creating mandalas from paper clips and rubber bands. "I'm sorry," Elena would always say. "I'll clean it up." "Leave it," Marcus found himself saying more and more often. "I want to see what she does next." He started taking his coffee breaks in whatever room Sophia occupied, watching her work. She rarely acknowledged his presence, but sometimes she'd look up and smile, or carefully place one of her creations near him, like an offering. Elena would work with quiet efficiency, but Marcus began to notice things. The way she sometimes winced when she reached for something high. The circles under her eyes that no amount of concealer could hide. The way she carefully packed away half her lunch to take home, even though he knew she was hungry. "Elena," he said one afternoon, not sure what he was about to say until the words came out. "How long have you been a housekeeper?" She looked up from folding his laundry, surprise in her eyes. "About 5 years. Since I came to New York." "And before that?" A shadow crossed her face. "Before that, I was in school. I was studying architecture at Universidad Nacional Autónoma de Mexico." She smiled, but it was weighted with loss. But then Sophia came, and her father, well, life had different plans. Marcus felt anger rise in his chest, hot and unexpected. "He's not in the picture?" "He's not anywhere," Elena said quietly. "He wanted me to. When I got pregnant, he wanted me to choose. And I couldn't. So I chose her." She glanced at Sophia, who was building a tower from Marcus's business card collection. "I don't regret it. Not for a second. But sometimes I wonder what she could have if I'd made different choices. If I'd been stronger, smarter." "Stop," Marcus said, more harshly than he intended. Elena flinched, and he softened his tone. "You're one of the strongest people I've ever met. You're raising a remarkable child alone, in a country that wasn't yours, in a language that wasn't yours. That takes more strength than anything I've ever done." Elena stared at him, something shifting in her expression. "You don't really believe that?" "I do," Marcus said, and realized it was true. He thought about his own accomplishments, the companies acquired, the deals closed, the empire built. All of it suddenly seemed smaller than what Elena did every day. "I make money. You make magic. There's no comparison. Before Elena could respond, Sophia approached them, holding something in her cupped hands. She stopped in front of Marcus and carefully opened her palms. Inside was a paper crane, folded from one of his business cards. But it wasn't just any crane. Sophia had somehow folded it so that his name appeared as the crane's heart, visible through the translucent paper. "She made it for you," Elena whispered. "She's never given anyone her art before. Not even me." Marcus took the crane, his hands trembling slightly. It weighed nothing, this gift, but it felt heavier than any trophy he'd ever received. He looked at Sophia, who was watching him with those huge, dark eyes, and felt something break open inside him. "Thank you," he said, his voice rough. "I'll treasure it." Sophia smiled, and without warning, threw her small arms around his legs in a brief, fierce hug before running back to her building project. Marcus stood frozen, the paper crane in one hand, the ghost of that hug warming him from the outside in. He looked at Elena, who was crying silently, her hand pressed to her mouth. "She's never hugged anyone but me," Elena said through her tears. "Not the doctors, not other children, not anyone. She's terrified of being touched. But she trusts you." Marcus couldn't speak. He looked down at the paper crane, at this child's gift, and understood that something fundamental had changed. His carefully controlled world was expanding, cracking open, letting in light he hadn't known he'd been missing. That night, long after Elena and Sophia had gone home to whatever small apartment they could afford, Marcus sat in his office, looking at the paper crane he'd placed on his desk. Behind it, the city glittered with 1,000 lights, each one representing someone's life, someone's dreams. For the first time in years, Marcus Chun felt connected to those lights. For the first time in years, he felt like he might actually be alive. The truth came at Marcus sideways on a Thursday morning in November. He was in the kitchen making coffee, something he'd started doing himself since Elena had shown him that even small rituals could matter, when he heard Sophia crying. Not the quiet whimpering of a tired child, but deep, gasping sobs that made his chest tighten with alarm. Marcus rushed toward the sound and found Elena in the hallway, holding Sophia tight against her chest, tears streaming down her own face as she whispered desperately in Spanish. Sophia's little body shook with each sob, her hands pressed to her ears. "What happened?" Marcus demanded. Elena looked up at him, devastation in her eyes. "I have to leave. I'm so sorry. I have to go. Tell me what's wrong." He kept his voice calm, steady, even though his heart was racing. "The clinic called. They have an opening for Sophia's evaluation, the developmental specialist we've been waiting months to see. But it's today in an hour, and I don't have anyone to cover for me, and I can't lose this job. I can't." Her voice broke. "But Sophia needs this evaluation for early intervention, and if we miss this appointment, it could be months before they have another opening, and every month matters at her age, and I don't know what to do." "Go," Marcus said immediately. "Go to the appointment, but your house is just a house. Sophia is a child who needs help." He stepped closer. "Elena, go. You're not going to lose your job. I promise." Elena searched his face, looking for the lie, for the catch. She'd probably been let down by promises before. "You mean it?" "I mean it. Go. Take care of your daughter." Elena nodded, gathering Sophia's things with shaking hands. Sophia had quieted to hiccuping sobs, still pressing her hands over her ears. Marcus understood suddenly. She was overwhelmed, her senses overstimulated by the stress and noise and change. "Sophia," he said softly, crouching down. "Look at me." She peeked out from her mother's shoulder, her face wet with tears. "You're going to see a doctor who understands how brilliant you are. Someone who can help you show the world all the amazing things inside your head. Can you be brave for 1 hour?" Sophia stared at him, then slowly nodded. "Good. And when you come back, I'll have a surprise for you. Deal? Another tiny nod. This time, Sophia reached out and touched his cheek, just for a second, before hiding her face again. After they left, Marcus stood in his silent penthouse and realized his hands were shaking. He'd made promises he had no idea how to keep. A surprise? What did he know about what a 3-year-old would want? But he knew who might. Marcus spent the next hour making phone calls to people he usually only contacted for business. By the time Elena and Sophia returned, he'd rearranged his entire afternoon schedule and made decisions that would have shocked his assistant speechless. Elena looked exhausted but lighter somehow, as if a weight had shifted. Sophia was calmer, clutching a pamphlet with colorful pictures. "How did it go?" Marcus asked. Elena sank onto his couch, something she'd never done before. "She's autistic." The doctor confirmed what I'd suspected, but was afraid to say out loud. "Autism spectrum disorder." She said the words carefully, like she was learning a new language. "She's very high-functioning, brilliant actually, but she needs support. Therapy, special education, interventions that—" Her voice trailed off. "That costs money," Marcus finished. Elena nodded, not meeting his eyes. "My insurance doesn't cover most of it. I'll figure something out. Maybe a second job, or I could help." Elena's head snapped up.
No.
"No, Mr. Chen, I can't." "You can. And you will." Marcus sat down across from her. "Here's what's going to happen. You're going to stop working for the housekeeping service. Starting Monday, you work directly for me, with a salary 3 times what you're making now. Health insurance that covers Sophia's therapy. And flexible hours so you can take her to appointments." Elena's mouth opened, but no sound came out. "I'm not finished," Marcus continued. "You mentioned you were studying architecture. I have connections at Columbia. I can make some calls, see about getting you enrolled in their program." "Stop." Elena's voice was sharp. She stood up, her hands clenched into fists.
Why?
"Why are you doing this? People don't just— no one is this generous without wanting something."
So, what is it?
"What do you want from me?" The question hit Marcus like a physical blow. He stood too, suddenly understanding how this looked to her. A powerful man, a vulnerable woman, a job offer that seemed too good to be true. "I want you to have the life you deserve," he said quietly. "I want Sophia to have every opportunity." He paused, searching for words. "I want to do something that matters. For 13 years I've been accumulating money I can't spend and power I don't use for anything meaningful. You and Sophia, you've reminded me what actually matters. Let me do this. Please." Elena's eyes filled with tears. "I won't sleep with you for a job." Marcus flinched. "Jesus, Elena. That's not— I would never." He ran his hand through his hair, frustration and hurt warring in his chest. "I'm not your ex. I'm not some predator trying to exploit your situation. I'm just a man who's finally found something worth caring about, and I'm terrified of losing it." The words hung in the air between them. Sophia, who'd been quietly playing with her pamphlet, looked up at both of them, her sensitive face creased with worry. Elena wiped her eyes. "I'm sorry. I shouldn't have assumed. It's just, in my experience, men who have everything don't give anything away without expecting payment." "Then your experience has been with terrible men." Marcus kept his voice gentle. "Elena, I'm offering you a job. A real job with a contract and HR oversight and everything legitimate. You can have a lawyer review it. You can quit any time. The only string attached is that you have to accept help, for Sophia's sake if not your own." Elena looked at her daughter, who was now watching them both with those unervingly perceptive eyes. Marcus could see the moment she made her decision, the moment a mother's fierce love overrode a woman's learned caution. "Okay," she whispered. "Okay. But I earned this, Mr. Chen. I'm not a charity case." "You'll earn every penny," Marcus assured her. And please call me Marcus. If we're going to be working together directly, we can skip the formalities. Elena nodded slowly, then seemed to remember something. You said something about a surprise for Sophia? Marcus smiled. Follow me. He led them through the penthouse to a room he barely used, his formal dining room, with its massive table that had never hosted a meal. Only now the table was covered with art supplies. Paper in every color, markers, crayons, modeling clay, building blocks, puzzles, stacking toys, and in the center, a large easel with a blank canvas. Sophia's eyes went huge. She looked at her mother for permission, and when Elena nodded, approached the table slowly, reverently, like it was a shrine. I called some specialists, Marcus explained. They said children on the spectrum often express themselves through art and building. I thought maybe Sophia could have a space here. To create. To be herself. Elena's hand flew to her mouth. Marcus, this is too much. It's not enough, he said. It'll never be enough. Sophia carefully selected a piece of blue paper, then a green marker. With intense concentration, she drew something. Marcus couldn't tell what at first. Then she held it up, and his breath caught. It was 3 figures, sketched in the simple style of a child who couldn't yet control a marker well. 3 stick figures holding hands. He knew immediately who they were meant to be. She's never drawn people before, Elena whispered. The therapists say that's a milestone. Drawing people means understanding relationships, understanding connection. Sophia walked over to Marcus and carefully placed the drawing in his hands. Then she said, in a voice he'd barely heard before, clear and certain, family.
Family.
The word hit Marcus like a tidal wave. This child, who barely spoke, had used one of her precious words for this.
For them.
Marcus crouched down to Sophia's level. Is that what we are? Family? Sophia nodded solemnly. Then she smiled, that brilliant smile that transformed her face, and hugged him again. This time Marcus was ready. He wrapped his arms carefully around her small body, this miracle child who saw the world differently than anyone else, and let himself feel everything he'd been holding back. When he looked up, Elena was crying again, but she was smiling too. Family, she repeated, testing the word. I guess we are. Marcus stood, still holding Sophia, and looked at Elena, really looked at her. Saw not just an employee, not just a mother doing her best, but a woman who'd fought her way through circumstances that would have broken most people. A woman who'd sacrificed everything for her child and never once complained about the cost. I know you don't trust easily, he said, and I know I have to earn that trust. But I promise you, Elena, I'm going to spend every day proving you made the right choice. For Sophia. And for you. Elena stepped closer, until they were almost touching, until Sophia could reach out and pull her mother into the hug. The 3 of them stood there in Marcus's dining room, surrounded by art supplies and possibility, and for the first time since he'd built his empire, Marcus understood what wealth really meant. It meant having something worth protecting, something worth fighting for, something worth becoming a better person for. Marcus had always thought of himself as decisive. In business, he could assess a situation in minutes and commit to a course of action that moved millions of dollars. But navigating this strange new territory of being part of Sophia and Elena's life required a different kind of decision-making, one that involved feelings he'd spent years trying to eliminate. The change in their arrangement happened on a Monday. Elena arrived not through the service entrance, but through the main elevator, with an employee badge and a contract that had been reviewed by 3 different lawyers at her insistence. She wore the same practical clothes. She'd refused his offer to include a clothing allowance, but she walked differently. Head higher, shoulders back. Good morning, Marcus, she said, testing out his first name like a foreign language. Good morning, Elena. Sophia. He smiled at the little girl, who was already gravitating toward her art room, as they'd started calling it. There's something I want to show you both. He led them to his home office, where he'd had a contractor work all weekend. The space had been divided. His desk and computers remained on one side, but the other half had been transformed into a small wonderland. A child-sized table with sensory toys and art supplies. A reading nook with bean bags and bookshelves at Sophia's height. Noise-canceling headphones in bright colors. A weighted blanket for when the world became too much. Elena's hand went to her throat. Marcus. You need to work, he said simply. And Sophia needs to be with you. This way, she's safe and occupied, and you're not worried. Plus, He hesitated. I like having her around. She makes everything feel less empty. Sophia had already discovered the reading nook and was arranging the books by some system only she understood. Elena watched her daughter, tears threatening again. You've cried more in the past week than you probably did all last year, Marcus observed gently. These are different tears, Elena said. I've been crying from exhaustion and fear for so long. I'd forgotten what grateful tears felt like. She turned to him. I don't know how to thank you by letting me be part of this, whatever this is. Marcus gestured vaguely between them, unable to name what was growing in the spaces between words. The weeks that followed developed a rhythm that felt almost choreographed. Marcus would work on his side of the office while Elena managed his life on hers, organizing his schedule, handling his correspondence, making his penthouse actually feel like a home instead of a museum. And between them, Sophia would build her towers and draw her pictures and slowly, carefully, begin to speak. The specialist said Sophia was thriving. The combination of therapy, a secure environment, and people who understood her unique way of seeing the world was working better than anyone had hoped. She still had hard days. Days when sounds were too loud and lights were too bright, and the world pressed in too close. But now she had tools to cope and people who understood. Marcus found himself learning a new language. Not just the technical terms, sensory processing disorder, executive function, proprioceptive input, but a deeper language of attention and care. He learned that Sophia needed warnings before transitions. That deep pressure helped her feel grounded. That she thought in pictures and patterns, and when he started structuring his explanations visually, she understood complex concepts that amazed her therapists. One evening in December, Marcus was working late when Sophia approached his desk. She'd been having a good day, chattering more than usual, showing him the paintings she'd created. Now she stood beside him, looking at the charts and graphs on his screen with curious eyes. What is it, sweetheart? He'd started using endearments without thinking about it, without questioning his right to this casual affection. Sophia pointed to a pie chart. Broken, she said. Marcus looked at the chart, a financial breakdown of his company's quarterly performance. What do you mean, broken? Sophia studied it with that intense focus she brought to everything. Then she reached for a piece of paper and drew her own version. But instead of the sharp edges of his pie chart, she drew flowing curves, and instead of the competing colors, she created a gradient that flowed from one section to another. Connected, she said, pointing to her version. Not broken. Connected. Marcus stared at Sophia's drawing, then at his corporate chart, and felt something click into place. She was right. He'd been visualizing his company as separate competing parts, when really, everything was connected. Marketing flowed into sales. Development fed into innovation. It wasn't a pie to be divided, but a system to be balanced. Elena, he called. Come look at this. Elena appeared from the kitchen, where she'd been preparing dinner. Another new routine. She'd started cooking meals they ate together, the three of them around his previously unused kitchen table. Marcus had been paying her for these dinners, but she'd been donating the money to Sophia's therapy fund. It had become a comfortable standoff of generosity. Elena looked at Sophia's drawing, then at Marcus's screen, and laughed. "She's redesigning your business model?" "She's fixing it," Marcus said, awe in his voice. "Elena, your daughter is a genius." "I know," Elena said softly. "I've always known. The world just needed to catch up with how she thinks." That weekend, Marcus implemented Sophia's visualization across his company's reporting structure. His executive team thought he'd lost his mind until they saw how the new model revealed inefficiencies that had been invisible before. A 3-year-old child had solved a problem his MBA-educated executives had been missing for years. Marcus had Sophia's original drawing framed and hung in his office. Not the office at Chin Technologies, but his home office, where it mattered more. But it wasn't all victories and breakthroughs. One afternoon, Marcus came home from a rare in-person meeting to find Elena sitting on the floor of Sophia's art room, her daughter screaming in her arms, both of them exhausted and tear-stained. "What happened?" Marcus dropped his briefcase and knelt beside them. "Bad day," Elena said, her voice hollow. "Really bad day. The therapy appointment went wrong. There was construction noise outside the clinic, and Sophia got overwhelmed, and then she had a meltdown in the taxi, and the driver yelled at us, and her voice broke. And I don't know if I can do this. I don't know if I'm enough for her." Sophia was rocking now, making a low humming sound that Marcus had learned was her way of self-soothing. Her hands covered her ears, her eyes squeezed shut against a world that was too much, too loud, too everything. Marcus acted on instinct. He went to his bedroom and grabbed every blanket and pillow he owned. He came back and built a fort right there in the art room, a cave of softness and dim light and safety. Then he turned off all the lights except one small lamp and turned on the white noise machine Sophia's therapist had recommended. "Come on," he said gently. "Let's go inside." Elena looked at him with desperate gratitude and carried Sophia into the fort. Marcus followed, pulling the blankets closed behind them, creating a cocoon of calm. Inside the fort, with the world muted and distant, Sophia's screaming slowly subsided to whimpers, then to hiccups, then to silence. Elena held her daughter and cried quietly, all her strength finally giving out. "You're not alone anymore," Marcus said into the darkness. "Elena, you don't have to be enough all by yourself. That's what I'm here for. That's what family means." "We're not your family," Elena whispered, but there was no conviction in it. "You don't owe us this." "You're right. I don't owe you anything. That's not why I'm here." Marcus shifted closer in the dim light. "I'm here because when I'm with you and Sophia, I remember how to be human. You've given me back something I thought I'd lost forever. So let me give you this. Let me help carry the weight." Elena looked at him, really looked at him, and Marcus saw the moment something shifted. The moment she stopped seeing him as a billionaire offering charity and started seeing him as just Marcus. A man who'd stumbled into their lives and realized he'd been lost until they found him. "Okay," she said simply. That night, after Sophia had finally fallen asleep in her mother's arms, after Marcus had ordered food delivered, and Elena had eaten for the first time all day, they talked. Really talked, in a way Marcus hadn't talked to anyone in years. Elena told him about Sophia's father, about falling in love with someone who'd promised forever and delivered abandonment, about crossing the border with nothing but a dream and a baby growing inside her, about the hardest years of her life, working 3 jobs while pregnant, giving birth in a free clinic, learning to navigate a system designed to keep people like her at the margins. "But every time I thought about giving up," Elena said, "I'd look at Sophia and I'd remember why I was fighting. She deserves everything. Every chance, every opportunity, every possibility. And I decided I'd move mountains with my bare hands, if that's what it took. You already have, Marcus said. You've built a life from nothing. You've raised a remarkable child alone. You've survived things that would have destroyed most people. Elena, you're the strongest person I've ever met. Elena smiled, a real smile, tired but genuine. You know what I realized today? When everything was falling apart and I felt like I couldn't take another step, I realized I wasn't just worried about failing Sophia. I was worried about disappointing you. Marcus's heart skipped. Why would you think you could disappoint me? Because you see us as this perfect thing, the beautiful struggle, the brave single mother, the special child. But it's not always beautiful, Marcus. Sometimes it's ugly and hard, and I'm not brave at all. Sometimes I'm just tired and scared and wondering what I'm doing wrong. You're not doing anything wrong, Marcus said fiercely. And you're not a perfect image I've romanticized. You're real, complicated,
Human.
that's what makes this mean something. What is this, exactly? Elena asked softly. Because I need to know. I need to understand what we are to you, before my heart gets any more confused. Marcus took a breath. This was it. The moment where he could retreat behind professional boundaries and safe emotional distance, or he could step forward into unknown territory and risk everything he'd been protecting himself from for years. I don't know exactly what this is, he admitted. I've never felt this way before. All I know is that I wake up thinking about you and Sophia. I plan my day around being here when you arrive. I celebrate Sophia's victories like they're my own, and when she struggles, it breaks my heart. And you. He paused, searching for words. Elena, somewhere between the cookies and the paper cranes and the terrible, beautiful reality of your lives crashing into mine, I fell in love with you. Elena's breath caught. Marcus. I know it's complicated, he continued quickly. I know there's a power imbalance, and you depend on me for your income and Sophia's therapy. I know I could be just another man trying to take advantage. But I swear to you, if you don't feel the same way, nothing changes. Your job is secure. Sophia's support continues. We stay exactly as we are. I needed you to know. Elena was quiet for a long moment, and Marcus felt his heart hammering against his ribs. He'd negotiated billion-dollar deals with less fear than he felt waiting for her answer. You want to know what I see when I look at you? Elena finally said. I see a man who spent 13 years building walls so high he couldn't see the sky anymore. And then I see those walls crumbling, brick by brick, every time Sophia hands you a drawing or asks you to play. I see someone learning how to be soft again, how to let people in. She reached across the small distance between them and took his hand. I see someone I could love. Someone I think I already do love. And that terrifies me. Why? Because what if this is temporary? What if you wake up one day and realize we're too complicated, too messy, too much work? What if you decide playing house with the maid and her damaged daughter isn't as appealing as it seemed? Marcus squeezed her hand. Sophia isn't damaged. She's different, and different is magnificent. And you're not the maid. You're Elena. You're brilliant and fierce, and you've survived things I can't imagine. You're the person who made me remember that being alive means feeling everything, not just the safe parts. He leaned closer. And this isn't temporary. I don't know exactly what it is yet, but I know it's real. It's the realest thing I've felt in years. Elena searched his face, looking for the lie, for the catch. But Marcus had spent 13 years perfecting the art of deception in business. He knew how to hide what he felt. And right now, he was hiding nothing. Every vulnerable, Terrifying feeling was written clearly in his eyes. Okay, Elena whispered. Okay, let's figure out what this is. Together. And there, in a fort made of blankets in a room full of a child's art, Marcus kissed Elena Rodriguez for the first time. It was gentle and careful and tasted like salt from her tears and hope from his heart. When they finally pulled apart, Elena laughed softly. This is insane. Probably, Marcus agreed. But I've spent my whole life doing the sensible thing. How's that been working for me? Fair point. They stayed in the fort until Sophia woke up, cranky and disoriented. But when she saw Marcus and her mother sitting together, still holding hands, something seemed to settle in her. She crawled into Marcus's lap and fell back asleep, trusting him completely. Marcus held her, this little girl who taught him more about life than all his years of success, and felt Elena's head rest against his shoulder. And he thought, this is what it means to be wealthy. Not the money in his accounts or the empire with his name on it, but this weight of a sleeping child and the warmth of a woman who'd chosen to trust him. This was everything that mattered. Section 5. Building Forever. The snow started falling on Christmas Eve, turning Manhattan into a snow globe of light and possibility. Marcus stood at his penthouse windows, watching the city transform, and marveled at how much his life had changed in just 2 months. Behind him, Sophia was arranging ornaments on the Christmas tree he'd had delivered that morning. Not by color or size, as most people would organize them, but by some pattern only she could see, probably by weight or texture or some quality the rest of them couldn't perceive. Elena sat on the couch, her laptop open, working on an admissions essay for Columbia's architecture program. This was his life now. This beautiful, chaotic, perfect life. Marcus. Elena called. Can you read this paragraph? I'm not sure if it makes sense. He crossed to the couch and read over her shoulder. The essay was about resilience, about building a life from blueprints drawn in desperation and hope. It was raw and honest and absolutely perfect. It's brilliant, he said. Just like you. Elena blushed. Even after 6 weeks of officially being together, whatever together meant when you were navigating new relationship territory while co-parenting a special needs child and maintaining professional boundaries, she still hadn't gotten used to his compliments. You have to say that. You're biased. I'm honest, Marcus corrected. And Elena, you're going to get into Columbia. You're going to finish your degree. And then you're going to design buildings that change the way people think about space and beauty. And who's going to watch Sophia while I'm in classes? I will, Marcus said simply. Or we'll hire additional help. Or we'll figure it out together, the way we figure everything else out. The word together still felt new in his mouth, but it was getting easier. Everything was getting easier, actually, as Marcus learned to let go of control and trust in the beautiful unpredictability of family. His business hadn't suffered. If anything, it had thrived. The executives at Chin Technologies had been shocked when their ruthless CEO had started leaving the office at reasonable hours and working from home 2 days a week. Even more shocked when he'd implemented new family leave policies and created an on-site childcare center with programs for children with developmental differences. Sir, his CFO had said carefully, these policies are going to cost us millions. Then we'll make more millions, Marcus had replied. I'm not interested in running a company that grinds people down anymore. We're going to be profitable and humane. Figure out how. They had. Turned out that when you treated employees like humans instead of resources, productivity went up. Retention improved. The best talent wanted to work for you. Marcus's corporate revolution had been featured in 3 business magazines, and he'd been asked to speak at a conference about the future of ethical leadership. It was all Sophia's fault, really. She'd taught him that different didn't mean less, that accommodation wasn't weakness, that the best results came from understanding how people actually worked rather than forcing them into rigid systems. Done, Sophia announced, stepping back from the tree. Marcus and Elena came to look. The ornaments were arranged in a spiral pattern that somehow made the tree look more balanced than any decorator could have achieved. At the center, Sophia had placed the paper crane she'd made for Marcus months ago. He'd had it carefully preserved, and now it's served as their tree topper. "It's perfect, baby," Elena said, pulling her daughter into a hug. Sophia allowed it for a few seconds before squirming away to admire her work. Marcus's phone buzzed. A message from Mrs. Petrov, who'd returned from her family emergency last month. "Merry Christmas to my favorite family. That girl saved you, Mr. Chen." Both of them did. She was right. Before Sophia and Elena, Marcus had been successful but empty. Now he was both successful and full. Full of laughter and late-night conversations, and Sophia's endless questions about how things worked. Full of Elena's ambitions and her fears and her fierce determination. Full of love he'd thought he was too damaged to feel. "I have something for you both," Marcus said suddenly. Elena looked up, suspicious. "Marcus," we agreed. "No expensive gifts." "It's not expensive." "Well, it is, but that's not the point." He pulled out 2 small wrapped boxes. "Open them." Elena unwrapped hers first. Inside was a key, but not just any key, a key with a tiny paper crane charm attached to it. "What's this?" "It's a key to the penthouse," Marcus said. "But more than that, I want you both to move in. Officially. Not as my employee and her daughter, but as my family." Elena's eyes went wide. "Marcus, we can't." "Why not? You're here every day anyway." "Sophia has her art room, her routines, her safe spaces. And I." He took a breath. "I don't want to go to sleep without knowing you're both here. I don't want to wake up to an empty house anymore. I want the chaos and the laughter and the hard days and the beautiful days. All of it. Always." "That's a big commitment," Elena said carefully. "We've only been together 2 months." "I know. And if you're not ready, I understand. But Elena, I've never been more sure of anything in my life. You and Sophia, you're not just part of my life. You're the reason for it." Sophia had been watching this exchange with her characteristic intense focus. Now she walked over to her mother and took the key from her hand. She looked at it, then at Marcus, then very deliberately walked to the door and pretended to unlock it.
"Home," she said clearly.
Then again, with more certainty. "Home." Elena started crying, those grateful tears she'd learned to recognize. She's never called anywhere home before. Not her apartment, not my parents' house in Mexico. She's never had a place she felt safe enough to claim. Marcus knelt down to Sophia's level. "This is your home, sweetheart. Yours and your mama's. Forever and always. Nothing can change that." Sophia smiled and hugged him, one of her rare, precious hugs that meant more than anything money could buy. Then she hugged her mother, pulling them both together. "Family," Sophia said, the word she'd given them months ago. Forever family. Over Sophia's head, Marcus met Elena's eyes. He saw fear there and hope and love and something that looked like surrender, not defeat, but the good kind of surrender. The kind where you stop fighting against happiness and let it in. "Okay," Elena whispered. "Okay, we'll move in. We'll try this." "But Marcus, if it doesn't work." "It will work," Marcus said with absolute certainty. "Not because it'll be easy, but because we'll fight for it. And we'll be honest with each other. And when things get hard, and they will, we'll remember that we're building something worth building." "Like Sophia's towers," Elena said, understanding. "Exactly like Sophia's towers. Careful, balanced, beautiful." That night, after Sophia had fallen asleep in the bedroom they'd prepared for her, a room Marcus had personally designed with her therapist's input, with soft lights and weighted blankets and walls painted in calming blues. Marcus and Elena stood together at the windows, watching snow fall on their city. "I keep waiting for the other shoe to drop," Elena admitted. "For you to realize this is too complicated." "It is complicated," Marcus agreed. "But some things are worth being complicated."
"You taught me that."
"Sophia taught me that." "What did we teach you?" Marcus thought about it. About the journey from the man who'd stood at these windows months ago, master of an empire that meant nothing, to the man he was now, messier, more vulnerable, infinitely richer in every way that mattered. "You taught me that success isn't about accumulation. It's about connection. You taught me that strength isn't about never needing help. It's about having the courage to accept it." "And Sophia?" He smiled. "Sophia taught me that there are infinite ways to see the world, and the people who see it differently aren't broken. They're showing us possibilities we'd never imagine on our own." Elena leaned into him, and Marcus wrapped his arms around her. "You know what I think," she said. "What?" "I think Sophia knew. I think she knew from that first day, when she made you that paper crane, that you were going to be important to us. She sees things the rest of us don't see yet." "Then she saw something I couldn't see in myself," Marcus said.
"She saw someone worthy of this. Of you."
"I'll spend the rest of my life trying to live up to what she saw." "You already do," Elena said simply. They stood there as the snow continued to fall, transforming the city into something magical. Behind them, in her new room, Sophia slept deeply, dreaming whatever dreams came to children who saw the world as patterns and possibilities.